All right, everybody. So I am trying this to, trying going live again and, having a little bit of technical difficulties, but there's nothing to do but just do it and keep practicing with this. It's fun, but definitely a bit of a technological challenge for me for sure. So today's topic, I wanted to, to talk about a question that I often hear, which is, I've been on the carnivore diet for X number of days, weeks, whatever, and I haven't lost the weight that I wanted, or, I haven't lost anything on the scale, or I've gained weight. And I think that it is really important to kind of address this because something that can trip up a lot of people. And I often see people just jumping right away to assuming that it's not working because the number on the scale isn't changing, and then they just quit right away. And just when the effects of the diet are beginning to show themselves. So one of the things that I like to tell people first off is to, find other ways to measure your success. What the number on the scale is really not a great measure. And I think particularly so in the carnivore diet, it's just like not a useful tool. You can often see weight gain, and it's not necessarily fat. When I ask people, how are your clothes fitting or how do you look? The response I often get is, I look better than ever. My pants are loose. I had to tighten up my belt. And it's kind of like, well, this is success. Like just because the number on the scale isn't changing, that doesn't mean that you're not experiencing success. So, so that's one of the things that I think it's really important to look at on the carnivore diet. But also, there's so many benefits that come from going carnivore that are, separate and apart from the scale and from weight loss and from how you look. And I think it's important to really prioritize those. And I posted a video, or I posted a before and after picture, or a picture from the early days of my carnivore diet to yesterday. And I normally I don't really notice these, but apparently Instagram pops up pictures from your timeline. So a picture popped up of me from 2 years ago, and I actually was really, really surprised when I saw it, because my face looked so much more bloated and just fat, I guess. And, when I looked at the picture, it was kind of like, wow, I did not realize that's what I looked like. And that was 6 months into my carnivore journey. So it wasn't even like, it wasn't just the very beginning. I mean, I was 6 months in. I had already seen benefits. I felt like, I had a lot of improvements. So it's, so it wasn't like I had just started. And yet and still now, 2.5 years later from my start date, I mean, I look back on that picture and I see a huge difference in the way my face looks now versus then. So, that's just a reminder to myself, and a reminder that, the benefits are, they really do take a little bit of time to evolve and to show up, in a way that, you might want to see. Your blood markers might change quite significantly, but, that doesn't necessarily mean anything for your genes. Okay, so Chase LeBeau, hey, great to see you. So it says you've tried to start the carnivore last week, but you fell off and binged on junk food and a ton of carbs. How do you control cravings and get back on track? So That's, that's hard. That's definitely one of the challenges with this way of eating, that, sugar is, it's so captivated our brains that it can be really hard to, to resist eating them. And, your brain kind of fights back and kind of demands that sugar. So I would say in the very beginning, you don't ever want to be hungry. So don't try to both restrict your calories and restrict carbs at the same time. And really what you want to do is try as hard as possible to get yourself into ketosis, because once you're into ketosis, those cravings for sugar won't be as strong. Part of the deal with the cravings is that you don't really have enough energy. Your body was burning sugar for energy, and so when you take that away, you're going to feel tired, and until your body gets good at burning fat for energy, it's just going to be tired and looking for energy. So so that's one of the things that can happen. So I would recommend that you try to get yourself into ketosis, and then you want to eat enough so that you're not hungry, and so you don't have that to deal with, and then it's more of an emotional appeal and not so much a physical one. So, but that's actually a really great question. And, and it's something that plagues us all. And in fact, I actually lead a group on MeatRx, on that platform. So it's a group on addiction and recovery, and one of the things that we talk about is not only addiction and recovery from let's say alcohol or other drugs, but also sugar. And sugar itself does have a very strong impact on our brains, and in some ways I think very much like any other drug. And so your brain comes to, if you're addicted to sugar, your brain is going to be looking for it and is going to be looking, trying to get it. So, but for the most part, we say that the way that you deal with any drug is abstinence. And until, and you kind of got to get abstinent first, and then you can, sort of deal with all the emotional things and everything. But when you're using, it's really hard to deal with any emotional parts that come with it. Sugar addiction. So I think this is one of those things where you have to define for yourself. But I know, when someone told me about doing a ketogenic diet where I don't eat any sugar and everything, my first thought is like no candy, no chocolate, no nothing. No, I can't do that. And but for me, that was a sign. Hey, you maybe you do have a problem, because the idea of going without it was just impossible. But I think, I don't know. To me, it's pretty clear. If you are at a kid's party and you watch the kids playing before and then after the cake, like, it's pretty clear how sugar changes behavior. So it's not unclear to me that sugar changes behavior. I mean, I guess the question is whether you feel like you can't operate without it, or it negatively impacts your life. And those are questions you have to ask yourself. For me, it, when I spend, all day thinking about what sweet treat I'm going to have, when I choose not to go out or do things because I want to, eat some tasty treat, or if I feel like, feel sick after eating, a bunch of candy, for me, those are signs that some substance is negatively impacting my life. So, whether that means that you can never have any, sweet treat again, that's kind of up to you, and whether you feel like you can control how much you have and how much of an impact it has on your life. So, I can't, no one can really make that determination for you. But the other thing I wanted to say about, the rush that we want to see in terms of, seeing healing, like I said, when looking at the photograph of myself, I was really surprised at, how much I've changed since that picture. And, I'm 2 years in, and I'm actually feeling like I'm still seeing changes in my health and my body. that I didn't see before, you know. So uh, this is so this is a, you know, I think carnivore is really fluid. Like where you are at any given moment is really you know, it's really evolving and changing constantly. And so to have this notion that we should have success at a few months in, like, it's just, I think it's not helpful for us. You know, it puts a lot of pressure on us and makes it hard to just sort of lean back and enjoy this way of eating. Um, you know, I didn't, when I started keto, this was, you know, back in 2015. This was before like blood glucose or ketone meters were ubiquitous. I didn't even understand that that was something I should be using. There were, you know, the urine ketone sticks it was about all I ever used, and I didn't even really use that often. So at that time I was just starting to hear people talking about measuring your blood glucose and being pre-diabetic, and I didn't even really know where I stood in terms of what my numbers were, whether I was diabetic or anything like that. Um, so it, you know, it was a so as I kept hearing that, I finally decided to, you know, get one of these meters and start checking and seeing what my numbers were. So the first morning, you know, I had read that should test your fasting blood glucose, and that you should test it, you know, first thing in the morning, but even before you get up to go to the bathroom, before you start moving around or doing anything. So I did that, and the number was came out to be 110. And I didn't even really understand what that meant, but you know, as I did a little, you know, Googling and trying to figure out where that stood, I realized that that's actually really high, and I was really surprised because at that point I had been doing keto, I think like 6 months, and I had already lost, you know, 45 or 50 pounds. So it wasn't even like I was at the beginning of my journey. And so for my numbers to still be that high, I was actually kind of alarmed. Like I'm like, that's in the pre-diabetic range, I think. So so at that point I decided to really get more serious. You know, I started reading more books and really trying to understand what ketosis meant, how to get into it. I was more careful at that point to try to stay under 20 grams of carbs a day and really make sure that I was in ketosis and becoming fat adapted. You know, and so now when I check my numbers, you know, I am somewhere in the 70s to 80s for my fasting blood glucose. But you know, but it definitely, that wasn't something that happened overnight, I noticed, and it took a while for it to come down. So it was, you know, it was not an instantaneous process, but I see that as an incredible sign of my healing. Okay, Chase, you have another question. Speaking of keto, is the keto diet safe for diabetics? So, of course, I am not a doctor, and I cannot give you medical advice. So I am just speaking from what I might do if I were diabetic. Yes, I think that the keto diet would be, you know, a really helpful one, because the number one thing that it does is lower your insulin levels. So, you know, when you start to lower the sugar in your bloodstream, you know, that allows your body to stop producing all of this insulin to try to drive the blood sugar out of your you know, out of your bloodstream and into your fat cells, because that's what's really happening. You know, you know, our body likes to keep our blood sugar within a very narrow range in, you know, in the blood. And when we consume a ton of sugar, it has to go somewhere. So, you know, when we consume a lot of sugar, you know, then our insulin produces, or sorry, our pancreas produces the insulin which is then used to drive down that blood sugar by pulling it out of the blood and pushing it into fat cells or into cells to use. But, you know, cells are already full, then, you know, they kind of reject it. And at the point that your body can no longer push the sugar into fat cells or other cells to use, and it just stays and lingers in your blood sugar, that's the point at which you become diabetic, when you're no longer able to get it out. So anything that, to me, any diet that helps you reduce the amount of sugar that's in your bloodstream is a, that's a benefit. Like, to me, that seems like the best course of action. So I definitely have seen people who are diabetic, type 2 diabetics, who have seen great success in bringing down those numbers, and are able to perhaps even reverse their diabetes. So that doesn't mean that, if you're diabetic and you do this diet and you bring your numbers down, that you can then go, headfirst into a bucket of ice cream. That just means that while you're eating a keto diet or a low carb diet, you may not need any medication to control your blood sugar. But if you go back to eating the way you were, then yes, you're going to need that medication. It's not going to work. So that would be my recommendation. And frankly, as I was saying, when I first started testing my blood glucose and discovered that my numbers were, really, really high, that actually suggests to me that, in fact, I was pre-diabetic. Now nobody had said anything to me. Now, I'm not one of those people that goes regularly for my yearly checkup the way I'm supposed to. So I don't know, I don't know what my blood, blood glucose would have tested at. But honestly, I'm more vigilant about looking at, the test numbers that come back when I, go get blood work and stuff done. And I've seen things that I felt were alarming and that I didn't have a doctor, call me about. So frankly, I don't know that a doctor didn't just kind of look at, my numbers and say, well, she's middle-aged and black and, obese. Of course she's got high blood sugar, and just not said anything about it. So, I don't know. But I would say for me, I have certainly turned around the condition that I had. Now my blood glucose, my fasting blood glucose is, regularly in the 70s, occasionally in the 80s. I notice that when I eat leaner protein and a lot more protein, it will go up into the 90s. But, that's, still acceptable. So, that can be helpful. Any more questions? Let's see. The other thing, the other thing I wanted to say was, in terms of your, the speed of or the success of the carnivore diet, I think that, we really do have to pay attention to a lot of different markers in terms of, deciding whether we are having success or not. And so I do think it's a really good idea to go in and get your blood, your blood work done. And I know sometimes some of us don't want to go to the doctor. We've spent years having the doctor, scold us or chide us for our weight and, tell us to lose weight and just, get a little more active. And, nobody wants to hear these things, and they're really annoying and not helpful. So, I think that, many of us have a natural reluctance to kind of go to the doctor or even talk to them about what we're doing. But I think it is important to get that baseline so that you have something to compare it to. Okay, so Chase, you ask, is lipase okay to use since you have IBSD? You've heard horror stories of people having violent digestive system episodes whilst transitioning. I don't know. I've actually not ever, I didn't use any supplements or any digestive aids when I switched to a carnivore, a carnivore way of eating. I think that for some people it might be helpful, but I don't know. If I think I might start with just doing the carnivore diet and seeing how that goes, and then deciding at that point if you feel like you need to incorporate some supplements in. I will say that upon over the course of the last couple of years doing a lot of research and stuff on this way of eating, what I've heard from the Paleo Medicina clinic has really intrigued me. They felt that a lot of the disorders that people are facing, are have to do with permeability, permeability in the gut, and that those symptoms, well, um, they talk about the things that can contribute to that permeability. And I think a lot of those things are things that we do on the carnivore or on the keto diet. So it could be that once you start removing those things, you might see some success that you might not have expected. So dairy, for one thing, they say absolutely causes permeability for everyone, regardless of whether you think you're lactose intolerant or anything like that. So that's something to consider for me. Having a lot of autoimmune and inflammation issues, that I took out dairy, and for me, the outcome of that was my asthma went away. So that was like huge, and really worth doing. So I don't know, you kind of have to decide for yourself. Oh, and artificial sweeteners, that was another one. All of them, they say, are a problem and cause intestinal permeability. So if you are struggling with IBS of any kind, I think that might be a place that you want to start looking. And it may take a couple of weeks for a lot of that stuff to resolve. Like, I don't know how quickly the intestines start to heal or recover, but it might be a little while. So if you had a cheat or a binge last week, it may take it may take a couple of weeks to kind of recover from that and start making progress. So those are my thoughts there. And and I'm looking at my camera here. The lighting is crazy. Like, it's, I get a lot of direct sunlight in my house, and right now I'm like under direct sun. So that's why it's like all whited out here. So sorry about that. But then let's see, I had another point that I wanted to make about the carnivore diet. I think that, maybe we also have really, hopeful and perhaps unrealistic expectations about how much can be resolved with the carnivore diet. And so I think that for me, getting, really focusing on the diet and dialing that in and doing the best I can to support myself is really important. But it worked best when I did that in conjunction with actual, whatever kind of prescription medications, were necessary. So if you're having like a chronic or an acute, symptom, kind of dealing with that with whatever medications are necessary, and then adding on making this change in eating can help you to kind of get ahead and kind of deal with whatever that symptom or problem is. So I find for myself, I'm still struggling with eczema. That's something that I have dealt with all my life. And I still sometimes have flare-ups, and I have tried to treat it by just, the way that I'm eating. But it doesn't work. And so it really, when I finally just went ahead and got the super strong steroid ointment to kind of deal with it, and that really helped a lot. So I think that I can maintain, certainly, using a carnivore diet, but I kind of needed that, the prescription intervention there to kind of tamp things down and get into a little bit more comfortable shape. So those are my thoughts there. The diet is amazing, but it does not make me bulletproof, and I can still get sick, and things can still happen. So it's important to give ourselves a little bit of grace there and know that we can still be sick. It's okay. That happens. And things do take time. And, the way we've been eating and the way we've been living for decades, we've been doing that for a long time. So it's not surprising that we would take a long time to heal. So, a few months, even, 2.5 years is nothing in comparison to the decades of abuse that I've put my body through in the form of, really poor food choices. So I'm actually really hopeful and excited to see what my health is like, and what I feel like in another 5 years. I mean, I already feel certainly that I'm in the best shape of my life, and I feel far better now than I ever did. But I wonder how much better can I feel, because I didn't think, when I went keto, like I felt so much better then. I didn't think that there was a lot more to go from there. I didn't expect to feel, that much better from there. And I'm really surprised that, in fact, I feel way better than I used to before that. So I think that it's hard for people who haven't experienced great health, to really wrap their heads around that, and understand what it can feel like to feel phenomenal. And even still, I mean, I have people like my friends and stuff remark on how much energy I have, and how I never get tired. I seem to be able to go, long periods without sitting down or having to take a rest. That I'm really strong. Like, I have a lot of stuff in storage, so I'm always like moving, things and carrying boxes upstairs, and stuff like that. And people always remark on how strong I am and how much I'm able to carry. But when I, say, well, it's the diet, and, you can feel this great too, they're just like, whatever. And it's like, this isn't just a random gift of God. This isn't a random act of strength. But this is achievable for you too. But, nobody believes that, and they won't until they experience it. But, I at least am trying to say to you, all of you newbies, and or people who are considering and haven't yet taken the step, it really is amazing what can happen when you are patient and you lean into this. And the other thing too is you really only remember like what you looked like yesterday. It's very difficult to really remember how you felt 3 months ago, a year ago. So the progression towards health is this slow rise, but when you fall off and have a cheat or eat something you shouldn't have, the next day you're going to feel in the toilet. But the power of that experience is that you can see a remarkable difference between how you felt one day and how you felt the next. And so, while I don't encourage you to have cheats or fall off, I would say when those things happen, really pay attention to how you feel. Catalog through your head, through your mind, how each part of your body feels. Do you have headaches? Do you feel nauseous? Do you feel shaky? Is it hard for you to focus? Are you crying a lot? Do you find it hard for you to modulate your emotions and your mood? Do you feel like your heart is racing? Do you feel exhausted? Do you feel sweaty or out of breath? Do your joints ache? Do you feel very bloated and puffy? When you press your thumb against your ankle, do you see an indent for very long? These are all the kinds of questions to ask yourself that next day, and really pay attention to the answers. So you get real good information, from your body about whether this way of eating is a good idea or not. And try to remember that feeling, so that the next time you want to have that sweet treat or whatever it is, you can remind yourself, hey, the last time I did that, I like cried every day for a week, or I had that horrible stomach episode and I wasn't home, so I was locked in the bathroom somewhere and it was awful. All of those sorts of things. Those are really good ways of kind of, keeping yourself on track. So that would be my recommendation. Remember those things. And, the other thing too is like we're so often like trying and experimenting and trying new things, but it is important to kind of be a little bit scientific and methodical in, cataloging your reactions to whatever that experiment was, and writing it down, because, we don't remember these things. We think we do, but we really don't. So just write it down and ask yourself like the same set of questions over a 2-week period and see how you respond. And it's interesting, some of us think like dairy does, we decide whether dairy works for us or not based off of whether, we have like the symptoms that you expect with lactose intolerance. And that might be, you might have some stomach upset or whatever, but, maybe that's not the symptom you get. Some people get migraines. Some people's depression comes back. Some people, have acne. Some people get, weird kind of joint pain and muscle pain. Some people, a lot of people get the gastrointestinal distress, whether it's diarrhea or nausea, or just gas and stuff like that. So I would say, really pay attention when you're doing these experiments and see, and then kind of, keep that information, so that can help you strengthen your resolve too as you follow this way of eating. Okay, so man, I can't believe I've talked for like 30 minutes here. I see a couple of you here. Does anybody have any questions? Go ahead and type that into the chat box, and let me know what you're thinking. I love that smiley face, Sarah. That was thanks a lot. That was very nice. Anybody have any questions before I close out? That was, I've really enjoyed this. This was actually a lot of fun, and I would definitely want to come back and do it again. I think I might do this Friday. I'm just trying to decide like when is the right time, but I think I might do it Friday, either Friday morning around 11 or 11 Eastern Standard Time, or 5 Eastern Standard Time. So let me know if you have any thoughts about that, and type any thoughts or questions into the into the messages. Chase, you ask what's my favorite red meat. So beef, hands down, is what I have all the time. But of course, all ruminant meats are great. You just choose the one that you like best, and works for your budget, and is easy for you to get. I'm sure if I lived in Australia, I'd be, screaming, all I want is lamb. Lamb is it. Lamb is the best meat in the world. But, I grew up here in America, so beef is what I had and what I got used to, and beef is what I love. That's the best thing. And, and that's what I want. And now, since following this way of eating, I've gotten, my tastes have really gotten more refined, and so there are like specific cuts of meat that I really prefer the taste of than others. So that's kind of interesting. And then one thing I'm trying to do is I have a podcast now, the Black Carnivore podcast, and the episodes are I actually have a podcast on like Apple Podcasts, Google, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcasts. But I also upload those episodes onto my YouTube channel, so you can always look for it there. But one of the things I wanted to do was get a local farmer to to come on and let me interview them, because I think as a city person, I really have no idea where my food comes from, and what their lives are like. And I think that a lot of us have a lot of misinformation about animal husbandry, where our food comes from, what is important in terms of making sure that you have quality food, what they should be fed, all of those things. And well, when I was younger, I, tried to do a vegetarian and a vegan diet, and I got a lot of information about what was happening in animals' lives and what the slaughter system was, and in America. And I think that a lot of that information, well, one, is outdated, and two, doesn't necessarily reflect what's happening in this country versus other countries and so on. So I think it is important to start talking to the people that are actually out there doing it. And one of the things that I think was kind of mind blowing for me, I was talking to someone who, basically was talking about how each individual cow, has its own, sort of flavor profile, so to speak. So, it just didn't occur to me. And I think that in America, we have been so, our tastes and our expectations about foods have been so controlled that everything is about creating a uniform taste. So, we've eaten so much processed food that the idea that there's variation within one type of food is like, it's just not acceptable. The thing that we like about McDonald's is it tastes the same all the time, everywhere, no matter where you go. And we expect that of everything that we eat. And I realized I expected that of beef, so like the idea that one cow tasting different from another, like, just kind of, it just didn't occur to me that would be the case. But of course, why wouldn't that be the case? Each strawberry is a little different. Every strawberry I've ever eaten, none of them tasted exactly the same, although, they're all in the same strawberry family. So, that just got me thinking, like, there's a lot that I need to unpack about my beliefs about, animal husbandry, and one of course being, like, how important is grass-fed beef, and and what does that look like? I mean, we talk about, we want a cow that's only been grass-fed and finished on grass and all of that, but what does that mean for the cow that lives, like, in North Dakota versus the cow that lives in Florida? The one in North Dakota, like, can't be out all the time. There isn't grass all the time. So what then? What does it mean to be grass-fed in that context versus, in Florida? And does it matter? So I'm trying not to be so, monolithic in my thinking about these things, and, ask the questions of the people who are doing this work. And hopefully, they will have some answers that'll be meaningful for all of you as well. So I recommend that you check out, those upcoming podcast episodes, and listen to the episodes that I've put out thus far, which I think are, really amazing. So anyway, I have enjoyed being here with you all today. This is the first of what will be many more conversations, and I look forward to talking to you all soon. So I will see you later. All right, bye.